As I mentioned, we're going to spend really just about 5 or 6 minutes period on authorization and accounting put together. And I know that can be a little tough slash frustrating from your point of view because you really want to dive in and do a lot of labs, etc. But these are going to be really minor topics. I hate to use that term, but they're going to be pretty minor on your CCNP switch exam. So I want us to spend more time on the bigger topics. And the thing is, frankly, CISCO can make an AAA exam, make a separate certification just for AAA, and I could spend hours sitting here talking about it. But I do at least want to give you an idea of what's going on with authorization and accounting. I don't want to just ignore those. And the one thing we better know for the exam, and of course for the real world, is the differences, because people tend to use authorization and authentication as interchangeable terms, and they're really not, because authentication decides whether we're letting you in the door in the first place. Authorization dictates what you can do once you're in my house. And what happens with authorization, AAA authorization that is we create user profiles that are checked when a user attempts to use a particular command or a service. And a couple things it has in common with authentication: you can create a default list or a named list, and of course you have to have AAA new model running if you haven't done so already. And I'm just going to show you a couple options here on the board for both authorization and accounting. And you can see AAA authorization, and gosh, you've got groups for, commands. Watch your commands versus config commands, because commands would be for your exec commands and config commands would be for your configuration mode commands. But as I'm sure you're thinking, if this is the first time you've already seen it, good Lord, this is detailed. And yes, it is. That's why I'm telling you we could spend hours on this, but we are not going to. Network is a commonly used one, especially since PPP comes in there, our point-to-point protocol. Also, SLIP and ARAP. If you don't know what those are, you're not missing anything. You're perfectly fine. But PPP you've definitely used in the past. And let's see, we've got some template authorization. We're definitely not getting into that. And here for this list, for this example, I simply chose exec. And then you have the exact same selections or exact same options that we had in authentication. You can create a named authorization list or create the default one, which is of course the one to be used when there isn't a named one. Now we've got AA authorization exec default, and then again, mostly the same choices. We've still got our server group, and we've got the option to use our local database. We have the none option. I like that they put always succeeds in the paren in authorization when I don't think they had that in accounting. One different one that I want to point out to you here is the if authenticated option. That's pretty unusual, and the thing there is if the user has successfully authenticated, then we consider them to be authorized via this method. So there you go. That's really about it. You then apply your authorization list to the appropriate lines with authorization, and here I just put them on the VTY lines. And how many on a CISCO switch? 16, right? Now accounting, that's when we're tracking what resources a user is actually using. Again, authentication decides whether you can come in my house or not. Authorization decides what you can do once you get in my house, and accounting is me tracking what you're doing while you're in my house so I can send you a bill for that later. Now, this tracking can be for security purposes, detecting people doing things they shouldn't be doing. I think it's much more common, though, to track network usage to bill for it. Because, of course, in larger companies, you may have a department that I'm heading that has a really expensive piece of hardware in it or an expensive service, and it costs me money to run it. So when someone from your department is coming in here and hitting that and using it, I'm tracking that, and then I'm going to send you a bill later. And again, AAA has to be enabled before you proceed with accounting. And I just want to show you a quick sample config here. This particular line would give us information on users who use commands while in privilege level 1, both when they start and both when they stop. And getting that same info for privilege level 15 would be easy enough. Just replace the 1 with 15. Because you remember there are actually 3 default levels. We do have a level 0, but the ones we use most of the time, if not all the time, are 1 and 15. And then we have the privilege levels in the middle we can configure. But that's really it. So this would just simply be AAA accounting commands then 1, then I'm making a default list, and I'm going to make it start, stop, record, start, and stop without waiting. And then you've got your locations for it, same as the other two, and that's it. So I went with the TACX server. And just 6 different accounting formats that I want you to know about for AAA. Commands, which is information regarding exec mode commands issued by a user. Connection, which is info regarding all outbound connections made from a network access server. Exec, information about user exec terminal sessions. Network, information on all PPP, ARAP, and slip sessions. Resource, info regarding start and stop records for calls passing authentication and stop records for calls that fail authentication. And then finally, system, non-user related system level events. Whew. I know, not the most exciting material in the world, especially if you haven't seen this stuff before. I would spend almost all of my time with this, as we did here with authentication. There's some good stuff there, and we saw that in the labs as well. So let's go ahead and head on to the next video. I believe we've finished this particular section. AAA is really security and monitoring, so I just decided to put it in the monitoring section. And I believe next we've got to talk about a little bit of design, which I admit again is not always the most exciting topic in the world, but it's definitely going to show up on your exam. And there is some good stuff in this next section. So I will see you there, and we'll talk about a little bit of network design planning.